I walked through the crowd after my speech, each step deliberate, each handshake firm. I could feel the air shift. Women who had once barely nodded at me were now asking questions, seeking advice, even subtly deferring to my insight. And Delilah? She clutched her champagne glass like it was a lifeline, her smile tight and brittle. She had never experienced the kind of validation that comes not from being born into privilege, but from clawing your way up with grit, intelligence, and relentless perseverance. And I could see it breaking her apart inside, a slow, seismic shattering of ego she hadn't even known was fragile. What happened next was the twist I hadn't anticipated. Archer pulled me aside after the gala, out of earshot of the socialites and photographers. His eyes were sharp, curious, a mix of admiration and surprise. "I've been hearing a lot about you," he said, his tone measured, almost playful. "And now I see you're the real deal." In that moment, I realized just how far I had come, not just from poverty, not just from Delilah's scorn, but from the self-doubt that had haunted me since I was a girl. It was also the beginning of a chain reaction I hadn't planned, but was entirely ready to see through. Because when a billionaire recognizes your worth and your sister has no choice but to witness it, the balance of power shifts in ways you can't ignore. The past 3 years of silent struggle, late nights, and personal sacrifice all funneled into that single evening. A moment that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. I could see the storm brewing behind Delilah's eyes, the subtle panic masked by forced grace. And for the first time, I understood the intoxicating clarity of being underestimated for so long, and then stepping into the light when everyone else expected you to falter. It's a feeling I can't even put into words fully, like watching the first rays of sun burn through the clouds after a lifetime of gray skies. The days after the gala were surreal. Messages and emails poured in, requests for consultations, invitations to speak, interviews for small business magazines. It was as if the world had finally tuned in to the frequency I'd been broadcasting on for years, and for once, someone answered. But beneath all of that success, a quieter, more personal thrill coursed through me. Delilah was noticing. She had no choice but to. And unlike the empty applause she was used to, this recognition carried substance, weight, and power, things she had always equated with status but never truly understood. It started subtly. Phone calls where she hesitated before speaking, invitations to lunch that felt more like interrogations, compliments wrapped in backhanded tones. "Rue, I heard your presentation was compelling," she said one afternoon, her words measured like a tightrope walker balancing over a chasm. I smiled, a small, private victory curling in my chest. "Thank you," I said simply, leaving her to stew in the unspoken knowledge that I had earned every word. She couldn't take it away from me, and that was delicious. I won't lie. There was a part of me that wanted more than just acknowledgement. I wanted her to feel the sting of every moment she had laughed at me, every cruel joke at my expense, every time she whispered about my trailer trash upbringing behind closed doors. But as much as I reveled in the justice of it, I also knew that revenge was more satisfying when it was subtle, elegant, and unavoidable. I didn't need to shout my triumph. I only needed to exist as proof of what she had tried to bury. One afternoon, a month after the gala, I received an unexpected email from Archer. He was frank, almost uncharacteristically candid for a man who always seemed so guarded. "I'd like to discuss a potential partnership with your consultancy," he wrote. "Your approach aligns with a project I've been developing, and I think you're the only person capable of executing it at the level I need." My pulse quickened as I read the words. This wasn't just recognition, it was opportunity, influence, a door opening into circles I had only dreamed of. And it was being offered directly to me, not to Delilah. When I told Delilah about it, her reaction was priceless. The mask slipped just for a moment before she collected herself. "Oh, that's nice," she said, her voice tight. "I'm sure he just wants your unique perspective." But I could see it, the jealousy simmering beneath her carefully controlled exterior. For all her wealth and social polish, she had never learned to handle being second, being overlooked, being proven wrong. And now she was faced with undeniable proof. I was not only capable, but in some ways indispensable. The irony wasn't lost on me. Delilah had built her identity around marrying into power, around flaunting it, around defining herself by proximity to success. I, on the other hand, had clawed my way into my own power, forged my path, and now held a piece of influence she had assumed would always belong to her circle alone. An Archer who had once been her ticket to prestige now looked to me for insight, expertise, and partnership. But the true turning point came when Delilah's facade cracked completely. It was a Saturday morning, and she stopped by my office unannounced, which she rarely did unless she had an agenda. Her perfectly sculpted expression faltered almost immediately when she saw the sleek, bustling space I had built, a far cry from the cramped, dim studio she remembered me inhabiting years ago. I offered her coffee, and she hesitated, glancing around like a woman who had just realized the foundations of her world were shaking. "You've really done well, Rue," she said finally, her voice low. There was a mix of awe, guilt, and an edge of resentment in her tone. She had no idea I had heard every cruel word she had spoken over the years, every mockery, every slight. And yet, instead of lashing out, she seemed momentarily fragile, like a socialite who had lost her social map and suddenly didn't know how to navigate a world where her rules didn't apply. I smiled softly, a quiet, knowing expression. "Thank you," I replied. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. There was no malice in my voice, only the calm satisfaction of someone who had survived and thrived. And I realized in that moment the most potent kind of power isn't just wealth or influence, it's the ability to carry yourself with dignity, to endure, and to rise above those who tried to diminish you. Delilah left my office that day with a stiff nod, a forced smile, and a silence that spoke volumes. She knew the balance had shifted, even if she couldn't articulate it. And I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same between us. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I had finally claimed my space, my recognition, my authority, my voice, and she had no choice but to witness it. I spent that night reflecting on how far I had come, from the cold, cramped studio apartment to being recognized by the billionaire who had symbolized everything Delilah valued. I realized something profound. Success and self-worth are inseparable from the journey it takes to claim them. And sometimes the people who doubted you the most are the ones who inadvertently highlight just how far you've come. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and strategy sessions. I was building bridges not just for my business, but for myself, for the quiet affirmation that I had earned a place at the table I had once only observed from afar. Yet, amid the whirlwind of success, I could feel the lingering shadow of Delilah's presence. It wasn't her physically hovering over me, that would have been simpler, but the constant, unspoken tension whenever our worlds intersected. Every event, every family gathering, every mutual acquaintance seemed to carry the weight of her judgment, now reframed by a grudging respect she couldn't fully conceal. One evening, I got an invitation that I knew would be a test, a weekend retreat at the Blackstone estate in Pemberton Hills. Delilah's note was polite, clipped careful. "We'd love to have you join us," Archer insists. "It's time you met the team in person." Part of me wanted to decline. After all, I didn't need their world to validate my own. But another part of me, the part that had spent years fighting for recognition, knew that walking through those doors on my own terms would be its own kind of statement. So I went, suitcase in hand, heart pounding with anticipation, fear, and a strange, delicious thrill. The estate was breathtaking. Endless manicured lawns, fountains that glittered under the sun, halls lined with priceless art. I moved through it with quiet confidence, reminding myself that wealth and grandeur are hollow if they lack integrity. I wasn't there to be impressed. I was there to exist as a reminder of the power of determination. Then I saw him, Archer. He greeted me warmly, shaking my hand with genuine admiration. "Rue," he said, his eyes steady and sincere, "you've done something extraordinary. I want you to help us build something bigger than either of us imagined." His words weren't empty flattery. They were acknowledgement, validation, and they carried weight. Delilah hovered nearby, a picture of grace under strain, but I could sense the storm brewing beneath her polished exterior. She had never had to compete in the arena of intellect, strategy, or real achievement. Her life had been cushioned by money, privilege, and the deference of those who feared social faux pas more than failure. Now, confronted by my presence, by my accomplishments, she had to reckon with the uncomfortable truth. I was not just surviving. I was thriving, and she had no control over it. That night, over dinner, the tension became almost tangible. Delilah forced polite conversation, laughter that rang hollow, while Archer asked probing questions about my work, my vision, my goals. Every time I answered, I could see the flicker of disbelief in Delilah's eyes, the unspoken acknowledgement that the sister she had mocked for so long was no longer defined by her poverty, her limitations, or her social standing. She was, in every sense, her own person, a boss, a strategist, a force that could not be ignored. but the true revelation came the following morning. Archer invited me to his private study to discuss a new investment opportunity, a venture that had the potential to reshape the city's tech landscape. As we pored over projections, budgets, and strategy, I noticed a folder tucked away on his desk marked Sinclair Legacy. Curiosity piqued. I asked about it. Archer hesitated, then sighed. It's a project I've been considering quietly. Your family's history, your ingenuity. It's why I wanted to meet you personally. I realized your insight could make all the difference. Opening the folder, I was stunned. It contained plans, contacts, and strategies for a citywide initiative aimed at supporting entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. The irony was breathtaking. Delilah had spent her life in the limelight showcasing philanthropy, yet here was her husband turning to me, the very person she had belittled, to execute the vision that would define his legacy. I could feel a quiet satisfaction swelling in my chest, a vindication tempered by a deep, almost poetic justice. Delilah found me later that day, standing on the balcony overlooking the estate's sprawling gardens. She didn't speak at first, just watched, her expression unreadable. Then she said softly, almost a whisper, I didn't realize. I didn't need her to finish. I knew exactly what she meant. All those years of mockery, all the condescension, all the cruel words, suddenly they were a testament to her own underestimation of me. I know, I said, voice steady, calm. And that's okay. You don't have to understand it fully, you just have to see it. There was no gloating, no bitterness, just quiet, unshakable strength. And I think that moment mattered more than any confrontation, any public victory, any recognition from the world. It was the moment I finally understood my own power separate from anyone else's approval. The weeks that followed, Delilah and I navigated a new dynamic. She remained polite, cautious, sometimes cold, but there was also an undeniable respect that had begun to take root. I realized that true triumph isn't about watching someone fall, it's about rising in such a way that your success cannot be ignored, even by those who once tried to diminish you. And as I look back on it now, years later, I understand the lesson at the heart of it all. The people who doubt you, who mock you, who try to keep you small, they are not the measure of your worth, your journey, your resilience, your ability to create something meaningful from nothing. That is the true measure. And when you claim your place unapologetically, the world will adjust around you, whether others like it or not. By the time Archer officially brought me onto the project, I had fully stepped into a world I once observed from the outside, one that had felt both unattainable and alien. Yet the strange thing was, I didn't feel out of place. My upbringing, my struggles, my years scraping by, they had given me a clarity and resourcefulness that no amount of privilege could teach. I navigated meetings, negotiations, and boardrooms with a quiet authority that surprised even me at times. And through it all, Delilah lingered on the periphery, a ghost of her former arrogance, trying to reclaim relevance in a world that no longer needed her validation. The true shock came one evening when I received an urgent call from Archer. He was uncharacteristically tense, a rarity in a man used to control. Rue, he said, there's a problem with one of the city's major investors. If we don't handle this right, it could derail the entire initiative. I didn't hesitate. Years of navigating crises in my small, scrappy businesses had prepared me for moments like this. Within 24 hours, I had outlined a solution, coordinated with legal teams, and personally negotiated terms that satisfied both the investor and Archer. When Archer walked into my office the next morning, his expression was a mix of relief and admiration. You did exactly what I didn't think anyone could do, he said. Honestly, I've been telling everyone about you, boss, he added, with a grin that made my chest tighten. That single word, the one that had started this whirlwind, now carried a weight far beyond recognition. It was acknowledgement, trust, and an affirmation of the path I had carved out with my own hands. Delilah found out about the success through her own social circle before I had a chance to tell her directly. The gossip hit her like a thunderclap. Friends whispered about my brilliance, about Archer relying on me, about the project that was shaping the city's future, and the sister who had mocked me for years was now watching me command influence and respect she had always assumed she alone possessed. I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes the next time we crossed paths, the subtle edge in her voice when she greeted me. It was no longer just curiosity, it was the realization that the sister she had dismissed was a force she could not control or ignore. And then the final twist, one that left me breathless, came in the form of a family revelation. While sifting through some old letters and documents for the project, I stumbled across a collection of journals belonging to my late grandmother. In them, she had written extensively about her hopes for all of her grandchildren, about the unfairness of wealth distribution in our family, and, most shockingly, about her belief that I was destined for something extraordinary. She had seen through the poverty, the setbacks, the mocking words, and had silently believed in my potential long before anyone else did. That knowledge struck me like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't just vindication. It was a reminder that resilience, vision, and character could not be dictated by circumstance or sibling rivalry. I confronted Delilah one afternoon, the journals spread between us. "Do you see this?" I asked softly. "This was always meant to be my path. It doesn't erase the past, but it explains why I survived it." She looked down, speechless, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time, I saw the woman beneath the polished surface, the one who had never learned to face her own inadequacies until now. I didn't mock her. I didn't savor her discomfort. Instead, I offered her a small, genuine smile. "You don't have to like it," I said, "but you have to see it, and you have to accept it." The silence that followed was heavy, but in it, there was also understanding, a fragile, tentative acknowledgement of a shift that had been coming for years. From that point on, our relationship changed. It wasn't perfect, and it would never be the carefree sisterhood of our childhood, but there was a new balance. Delilah learned, slowly and grudgingly, to respect my accomplishments, and I learned that victory didn't always need to be loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, lasting, and rooted in integrity. And me? I had finally understood what it meant to step fully into my own power, to survive, to rise, to create impact from nothing. The lessons were painful, the scars deep, but every moment of struggle had led to the realization that I was enough, always had been, and now the world had no choice but to recognize it. So, to everyone watching, especially those who have felt belittled, overlooked, or dismissed, your worth is never defined by the opinions of others. Fight, persist, and claim your space. The vindication, the acknowledgement, and the opportunities will come, not as a favor, but as a natural consequence of your resilience. And when it does, hold your head high because you've earned it. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment about a time you overcame doubt or betrayal, because your story matters and it might inspire someone else to rise above theirs.